I tend to overestimate my capabilities. And I just think that everything I try is going to succeed for some reason. So I immediately thought, well, this is easy, because in my head it's a simple transaction. You buy maize meal, you put it in a truck, you drive to Mandarin, people bring you goats, you come back to Harare. I actually thought it was going to take a few hours. It took a whole day.
We are recording.
Great.
I didn't ask you how you're doing. How are you doing?
It's the weekend, so I'm supposed to be resting. But yeah. I feel like the weekend needs to be like a month long for it to actually do what it's supposed to do. But so we're gonna have 12 weekends in a year. But yeah, it's the weekend. I'm trying to get a bit of rest. So watching telly and the like. But yeah, I'm trying to do a little bit of work, but also a lot of rest.
How do you, because you're working on a lot of different things, and are you self-employed at the moment, basically, like freelancing?
I'm doing a lot of things. So I have a full-time job at a research organization in Harare.
Okay.
But I also do like part-time work, research work, for remote work for the University of Edinburgh. I'm working I'm working on 2 projects with the University of Edinburgh. I don't know if you want me to give detail about that, but
yeah, why not? Like, tell it to me like I'm 5 years old.
So I work part-time for those projects. So one of them just does systematic reviews of literature or policies. It's a project called Uncover. Like it's a group of literature reviewers who work on different questions, particularly questions focused on COVID-19. So that's one. And then there's one that is looking to implement, I'm not sure how much I can say about this, but it's a digital health project that is being implemented or piloted in the NHS. So I am working on that as well. Then there is my startup, which I've taken a bit of a backseat with that. Someone else is working full-time on that, which just seeks to provide consumer medicines information to citizens or to residents of Zim. So those are the 4 things that I'm working on right now. Yeah.
Nice. Say the full-time job again. What are you doing?
It's at a research organization. So I'm like a postdoc research fellow there. So they do a lot of work with sexual health and reproductive health. So I've just joined, and I am trying to sort of find my way across a portfolio of studies that organization is doing.
No, that's really cool.
And
sorry, can I ask you? You're swinging on your chair, but I know I do this.
Oh, yeah. I should keep still, shouldn't I?
But everything behind you is swinging, so.
Oh my God, okay. Yeah, I should keep still. Oh my goodness, I'm sorry. Okay, let me try to keep still. So if I start to do it again, you could just raise your hand or maybe put a little emoji somewhere so that you don't have to say it. If I see it on the screen, I will know that I'm swinging.
Yeah. Cool. So I'll just give you what do they give us? What choices do we have? I'll give you this. Open mouth.
Oh yeah, that one works. Yes.
But I don't know. Will that be
they don't have a dizzy
now?
emoji. They don't have one that says I'm dizzy. So okay, that's fine. So yeah, that's basically what I'm doing. That's why I think my weekends should be a month long. I just need to rest.
Yeah. But so do you give yourself like specific like time you're like, okay, Sunday is completely off, or like how, what kind of like self-discipline do you have with yourself?
I have a timetable, like a proper timetable, like the ones that we used to have in school. So I divide my
They
my
were
day.
onto
So
something. Those teachers
yeah,
were onto something.
yeah. So I have an Excel. I put it in Excel, and then the different projects that I'm working on are color coded.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot to say, I'm also working on. I'm enrolled rather on an entrepreneurship course that is run by the University of Oxford. So I need to allocate hours to do the coursework for that as well. So I have color coded the projects, the 5 things that I need to just work on. So on the timetables, depending on what time of day it is, I block out a few cells for that project. So it's been working well so far. So early in the morning, whenever I wake up and 6:30 a.m., I'm working on one project. Then obviously between 8 and 5 p.m., I'm working on the full-time job. And then after work, I'm working on the entrepreneurship course and one of the Edinburgh projects, which I wasn't working on in the morning. So then on the weekends, I try to rest, but if anything is falling behind, it gets sort of caught up during the weekends.
Okay.
So so that's been my modus operandi. It's been working. Sometimes it's a hit, sometimes a miss, but yeah, I for the most part, I think it's working. Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah. It's because I struggle with this too, just like switching off and being like, okay, now I need to take a break.
Yeah, I think I underestimate the need for the brain to rest each time I plan. Like I never finish all the things that I put on my to-do list. I always put more tasks than I end up finishing. So
yeah,
the brain will just say, you know what, I'm checking out. If you wanna,
that's what happens, right?
You want to take and finish off whatever it is you're doing, you're on your own, So, but yeah, it's hard, but it's doable.
Yeah, no, and you have to kind of like, well, I guess the brain just, like you say, the brain makes the rules kind of thing. At a point.
Yeah. At some point, I literally just, you know what, because my alarm goes off at 3-ish in the morning, but sometimes I just fail to launch at 3. I'm just like, you know what, it's not happening today. So yeah.
Right, so your alarm goes off at 3. What time do you go to sleep?
I try to be in bed on a school night. I try to be in bed by 9 at the latest. 9 p.m. Yeah. So then I can get at least around 6 hours of sleep. But say, like I said, sometimes it just doesn't work. I don't even hit the snooze button. I just switch it off, and then so I have 4 alarms. So one is at 3, and then another is at 6:30. So whether I wake up at 3 or not, the one at 6:30, if I wake up at 3 and start working, the one at 6:30 tells me to now get ready for work, like the full-time job. Then if I don't wake up at 3, the one at 6:30 will then wake me up. Then I still get ready for work. So 2 alarms in the weekdays. Yeah.
So how's it going with your startup?
Yes. So maybe a bit of background for your listeners about what the startup does. So it's called the Medical Information Service. So what it basically does, I think maybe a bit of context. In Zimbabwe, pharmacies cannot advertise medicines. So they can put up signs and notices that say that they are pharmacies, but they can't say things like, oh, we've got, what's the medicine that's known by most people?
By the way, paracetamol anyone can get.
Yeah, let's try that. They can't say things like, we've got paracetamol here, it costs $1 for 30 tablets. So they can't do that kind of advertising. And most countries enforce laws that prohibit the advertising of medicines in the conventional way we see advertising. So the challenge.
So what's the reason
for that? Yes, because, well, medicines are regarded as a special product. Healthcare in general is a special product. It's not your average economic product. So because there's that information asymmetry that lay people do not know how to evaluate medical claims, if we open the door and allow vendors of medicines to advertise like normal consumer goods retailers advertise, it opens the door to predatory practices. So
snake oil.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a slippery slope, and people then are unable to evaluate the authenticity of advertising claims. The same is true anyway for other products, but the consequences of buying a juice that is not as tasty as the packaging says it is are less dire than buying a medicine that doesn't do what it says it does. So most countries just restrict or prohibit the advertising of medicines altogether. So that is the reason. It comes from a public health perspective. So in a normal health system or a well-served health system with a decent supply chain for medicines, that is not a problem, because you can reasonably find whatever medicine you're looking for if you walk into any random pharmacy. And in the UK, I know medicine prices are also regulated. So you can pretty much find the same price across many pharmacies for the same medicine. But in Zimbabwe, first of all, prices for medicines are not regulated in that way. So a pharmacy will be able to charge whatever price that the market will bear. So there's a lot of price variation across pharmacies. So one pharmacy can be selling a product for $9 and another could be selling the same one for $20. Second of all, there's the supply chain for medicines in Zimbabwe is very disrupted. It's fractured, it's unpredictable. So sometimes we have generalized shortages, even in the private sector, of some medicines. So there's probably 1 or 2 pharmacies that will have a particular medicine in stock at some point. But because that pharmacy is not allowed to advertise that, a patient will have to find it by accident or by serendipity or by referral. It's basically an unsystematic way of finding medicines. And if it's an emergency situation, a person could actually die while they're waiting to find the medicine that they need. So the Medical Information Service, which is the startup that I'm trying to get off the ground, sort of helps clients to identify pharmacies that have the medicines that they're looking for in stock. So if you're looking for a particular medicine or a product, you send a query to our contact center, and we will quickly, or as quickly as we can anyway, find out which pharmacies in your vicinity have what you're looking for. And if they're able to deliver to your doorstep and all that, and how much they're charging for it, if they accept your health insurance. So all those things we tend to find out for our clients. And then we sort of tell you that these are the pharmacies that have what you're looking for. These are the prices. These are the ones that accept your medical aid. So then the patient gets to choose where they want to go. And it's usually faster than pounding the pavement and trying to find that pharmacy yourself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's awesome. And so at this stage where that service exists, like you're offering that service, people basically just call you up.
Yes. So we use a WhatsApp platform because we figured WhatsApp is the most accessible communication modality, internet-based modality anyway in Zim. So pretty much most people who have smartphones have WhatsApp. And it's generally cheaper to use that, and it's convenient for sharing files if people want to share pictures of their prescriptions and the like. So yes, we are based on WhatsApp for now, and we have answered close to 2,000 queries since we started. without paid advertising. So it's purely word of mouth referrals, because we wanted to see what would happen, how would grow organically if we didn't advertise the service. So we haven't been advertising the service. So those who know it by word of mouth. We've put some posts on social media, but these were not boosted posts or paid posts or anything. And we actually have stopped doing that. So because we're also learning how to efficiently provide this service, we figured if we didn't advertise, we would get a manageable volume of queries that would allow us to learn without disappointing people on a large scale. So yeah, so in every sense of the word, it's actually a prototype that we're testing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Huh. That's awesome. And do the people who like use the service, do they pay you, or are the pharmacies like paying you to direct people towards them?
No, nobody is paying anybody yet.
Okay.
I know, we just we're actually trying to get a business model together. So that's usually, I think it's I've actually been speaking to someone about this, and they said that they have a similar problem, that they are quick to create something that they think is useful, but they then don't go on to figure out how to monetize it. They're just excited about delivering the product and seeing whether it works or whether people like it, but they haven't worked out exactly how they're going to generate money from it and who's going to be doing the paying. So for now, everyone who uses the service, whether it's pharmacies who tell us their stock levels and what they have and their prices, or it's clients who are looking for things, it's free for everyone. Yeah, although we've had some instances where patients will then ask us after we've assisted them, they will then say things like, oh, so how much do I owe you for this? So they assume that it's a paid service or something. But yeah, it's free for now. It's also free for pharmacies because well, it's very difficult to charge pharmacies, I imagine, because there is not yet a way to verify that a sale that has happened at a pharmacy is a direct result of a person's interaction with our service. So as long as that link is tenuous, it's very difficult to then say to a pharmacy, owe us money.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky thing, right? Like, but I think I feel like it's right what you're doing, like make sure you're adding value, right? Like it's like something useful, and trying to charge people for it can kind of get in the way sometimes. So it's also, there's also the thing of like, if you try to charge people for something and they pay, then you know for sure that they really want it. But yeah, that's a whole other story. But
so we're exploring different ways, different business models. So I can't at this point share that, but we have had ideas about how to make money from this, and it won't be from charging clients or pharmacies.
Yeah, interesting.
For the information.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about your experiments.
Yeah, I suppose I could tell you off the record, but yeah, after the podcast.
Yeah, cool. So is this the first business you've ever tried starting? Of any shape or form? Yeah.
If I'm being honest, it's probably not. I'm just thinking about, okay, so we have a farm in a small mining town north of Harare. And I remember, I think how old was I? I was in my early 20s. I kept a batch of chickens there, I think, and I decided it was too much work after that. But I think that was my first business. Yeah.
Okay. That's
I think that was my first business. So I did make a
So,
bit of profit, but I remember thinking this is too much work and I wasn't interested anymore after that. So yeah,
so were you selling eggs? Were you selling eggs or
no, no,
selling the
no.
chicken?
No, I was selling the actual chickens. I got someone to run the chicken coop for me.
Okay.
So it was just me financing it. So I just got someone to build a chicken coop. I bought the chickens, I bought the chicken feed, and they did the rest. So I don't even know whether I counted as an investor or a business owner because yeah, but I remember it was a very stressful period, I think. And I remember, oh no, now I remember a second business that I tried. So there was a time when a supermarket chain was in need of goat meat. And I knew that in Mount Darwin, again, north of Harare, there were people who get goats. So I went and I traded millimil for goats. So instead of paying cash for the goats, I would give a bag of maize meal for a goat. Yeah, it was a drought here, and and maize meal was in short supply, and people would rather have that than goats, I imagine. So yeah, I went with a family friend who had a truck, loaded it up with our maize meal bags, and we went all the way to Mount Darwin. And then yeah, we came back to Harare with goats, live ones. And then the supermarket chain has an abattoir, so we delivered the goats to there in the middle of the night. and then yeah, a few weeks later I got paid. But I also decided that was too much work and I didn't repeat that. So so yeah, I was in college, I think, at the time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So yeah, I'm actually surprised. I always imagined that the medical information service was my first business, but apparently it's not.
Yeah,
My third.
yeah.
Oh, it's my first business that has nothing to do with animals. So.
They should call us animals.
Yeah, yeah. So there you go. Oh, I didn't thought of it.
Wow, that's really cool. And like, do you think like when you were starting those, was it just like you needed some extra cash or something, or?
Yeah. I'm a fairly ambitious person, I like to think. And I tend to overestimate my capabilities. And I just think that everything I try is going to succeed for some reason. So I immediately thought, well, this is easy, because in my head it's a simple transaction. You buy maize meal, you put it in a truck, you drive to Mount Darwin, people bring you goats, you come back to Harare. I actually thought it was going to take a few hours. It took a whole day. So I suppose that's why I'm an optimist. So I tend to just dive into something if I believe it's gonna make money or whatever. I quickly I'm easy to convince. I convince myself very easily that it's going to work, and then see how it goes after that. Because I tend to visualize the outcome, and then the outcome is so attractive that I then don't care much about the intermediate processes. I just then start because I'm in love with the outcome. So that's my thought process generally when I start a thing. I look at the outcome and never really the long winding process in between.
Amazing.
The idea and the outcome. Yeah.
Do you how long do you sit with the outcome? Like just like imagining it? Like is it something you like sit with for a while before you're like, I have to do this? Or it's like as soon as it comes into your head?
Actually, one of my mentors used to have a nickname for me. I have to check if he still thinks that, but he used to refer to me as a reluctant warrior. So his definition of a reluctant warrior is someone who ruminates and ponders forever over something,
Yeah.
But then they eventually do it. So he says the first time you approach a reluctant warrior with an idea, their instinct is to say no. But then they go away and think about it, and they might actually then fall in love with the idea, but they still ruminate, just get excited by the outcome without actually moving. And then eventually they will move and it will happen, but they take a while. So I think that characterizes me quite well. Even when I write, I can do a whole week of just arranging ideas in my head, getting excited about the final product, but not writing a single word. And then on the last day of the week or whatever, and then I write, I sit down and write from start to finish. So that's my process. It's a lot of what I eventually do sits in my head for longer than it probably should. But I find it helps to sort of excite me. So the more I think about it, the more excited I become, but without actually doing anything. And then eventually I just then do it. But yeah, just to answer your question, I tend to sit with an idea for a long time. With the MIS, the Medical Information Service, the very first time I had this idea was actually in 2012, but I didn't actually do anything about it. The idea became more vivid when my grandmom fell ill and she needed medicines. And I, being the pharmacist in the family, I was sort of tasked with the whole making sure that she has her meds job. so that's when I thought this it was easy. It was fairly easy for me to find most of her medicines. The one that was challenging was morphine, which took a little over 24 hours for me to find. But then I thought about it and realized that if I took more than 24 hours to find morphine, and I'm a very well-connected pharmacist, how long was it taking the average person? So that's when it really started to become a more vivid idea in my head 3 years later. And then, yeah, I started really pondering over the law, over all the things that I thought could be found objectionable about the idea. I went to the mentor that I just talked about, and he was like, well, this is a brilliant idea. I think you should run with it. But then I kept saying, what if people say this? What if people say this? And that's when he said, you know what? You are such a reluctant warrior. I don't know what you're waiting for. So it took another few months. Then I eventually pitched the idea to the regulators, and that's just all hell broke loose. And there were a lot of people who found the idea objectionable because they thought it was just a clever way to advertise medicines, which I said earlier is not allowed. So it took 3 more years of us just going through courts. We went to the High Court and then later to the Supreme Court to get judges to inform the regulators that there was nothing illegal about the proposal to create the Medical Information Service. So it has taken many years, mainly because of that controversy around, is this a clever way to advertise medicines or not?
Yeah, I was wondering, because I never heard the outcome of because I knew you had taken stuff to court, but I never heard the outcome of that. So
yes, so the High Court, the High Court judge who had the case ruled that there was nothing illegal about the Medical Information Service, and it should go ahead. But then people who were respondents in that case, some healthcare regulators, did not agree with that decision. So they appealed that decision to the Supreme Court. That's how we ended up there. So I remember when my lawyer called me, I was in Edinburgh at the time, to tell me that we had won the case in the High Court. Actually, there was not even enough time for him to do that, because by the time I think he had the opportunity to tell me that we'd won, the appeal had already been lodged. So the message ended up being, oh, won at the High Court, but the respondents have appealed the decision. So I didn't even have time to open the champagne bottle to celebrate the High
Yeah,
Court win, because it came right attached to the, oh, but they've appealed to the Supreme Court. You know, so so that's what happened. So in 2018, that is when the matter was finally settled, November 2018, because that's when the Supreme Court pretty much agreed with the High Court to say, well, we need the service. We don't find anything in the law that would impede the execution of this much needed service. So that's when we had the green light to sort of proceed. But by then I was smack dab in the middle of a PhD, so I couldn't actually devote time to running the startup. In any case, the university was like, well, if you're doing the PhD, it's best to take a back seat on the startup, because my PhD sort of touched on the startup as well. And there were concerns that if I do both at the same time, my research would not be readily viewed as objective. So I had to sort of shelve the startup until I finished the PhD. So when I finished it in 2021, which was last year, that's when I really took on the job of sort of getting the startup off the ground. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, that's kind of amazing that you kept on like fighting for it. Did you have to pay this lawyer out of your own pocket? Or were you able to get funded?
No, actually, no. Very few people don't, very few people know this. But yeah, I had a very expensive lawyer, Professor Love Mobaduku. But he offered his services pro bono. But most people don't know that. So I think many people just assumed I was loaded, or I had a very wealthy benefactor secretly lurking in the shadows. But no, he didn't charge me a penny. Yeah, for all the work that he did, High Court work and the support work. Yeah.
That's amazing. And yeah, just amazing that you like realized how much of an issue it was, that it was worth kind of fighting for, because you've kind of like
I find that I think I'm a pretty difficult person to deal with when I'm convinced I'm right. So I think that is part of the reason why I kept pushing, because I was convinced about the legality of the concept, because the people will post the MIS. We're always arguing that it is against the law to implement it, because, well, it is tantamount to advertising medicines. If they had used any other argument, I might have, maybe I might have, backed down. I might have been convinced. But they used that argument and I did not agree with it. I'd read the acts and I did not agree with that. So it became more about, I need to convince them that they are seeing this wrong. So I think that is also why I sort of persevered, because I was convinced that they were not seeing things correctly. But actually, as time went on, I realized that maybe it wasn't about that, because it wasn't about that they were not seeing things my way. I think they were. Up to now, I don't know the real reason why they were so antagonistic, but I know it was not because they thought this was advertising, because it was obvious even to non-medical professionals that this can't possibly be equated to advertising. And even the judge who ruled in the court cases in both instances were very clear to say this is not the definition of advertising at all. So so I think that was also what kept me going, the idea that I just wanted to have people be clear that they were wrong. So.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like, what was it like taking like that decision to go to court? Like, how did, like, at what point did you?
So it wasn't the first decision I made. It wasn't like I woke up and said, you know what, I'm going to fight people in court. I am not actually I'm not a confrontational person by nature. Even when a confrontation doesn't involve me, I don't like hearing other people have a confrontation. I avoid it if I can.
Yeah.
So between 2015, because the court application was actually launched in 2016, towards the end of 2016, September, October 2016, thereabouts. So between 2015 July and 2016 September, it was just me trying to solve this without involving the court system. It was me holding stakeholder meetings, going to meetings with regulators, writing letters, like drawing like wireframes, showing how the thing would work, trying to get them to understand that this was not advertising. But after a little over a year, I realized I was not actually getting anywhere. And also that's when I received a very definitive no from the regulator. So all this while they were just writing me letters asking me for more information, asking me to conduct stakeholder meetings and all that. But they'd actually never given me a definite no, you can't do this. So they only did that in 2016. I think around July, August, that's when they actually wrote formally to say, no, we've considered everything that you've submitted and you can't operate this. So then I had the basis to approach the High Court, because you can't approach the High Court unless you have exhausted, they call it exhausting other domestic remedies. So you can't just wake up and go to court without showing that you've tried other less confrontational ways of resolving the dispute. So the High Court really is the last resort in Zimbabwe anyway. I imagine in other countries it's similar, but it's usually the last resort. If you can't get relief from other avenues, that's when you go to court. So that's when I decided to ask if I contacted Prof. Majoku to ask him if he thought this was worthy, to take to court and the like. And he was like, yeah, we should. He was actually, I remember the first conversation we had, he actually asked me if I was sure that what I was proposing was prohibited. It's like, are you sure you understood correctly? Like, he couldn't believe that something as simple as this could be prohibited. It's like, are you sure? I was like, yeah, so I showed him all the paperwork and the like, and then that's when he took on the case free of charge, which was very generous of him. So that's to answer your question. It wasn't the first thing I tried. I was actually trying to avoid confrontation. But in the end it was unavoidable.
Because I remember kind of watching this from afar and just being like, that's so hectic to like be going to court.
It's now that I look back and think about it, it doesn't sound as daunting. It's just, I think the whole process demystified court systems for me. They're actually not as intimidating as you think. Like, I always now say this to people that the courts are for everyone, the little guy, the big guy. Even the cost of submitting an application is very nominal. I think the idea is to make sure that everyone has access to justice. But there's actually very little that's intimidating about taking people to court. Maybe also because I wasn't actually paying the legal fees for this. So maybe what deters most people is because they can't get someone to offer the pro bono services for that. But I think that was a big influence for me to say, okay, fine, there is no direct financial cost to me. Unless, of course, if I'd lost the case, then maybe I would have been asked, depending on the judge, I would have been asked to pay the legal fees for the respondents as well. But no, that didn't happen. So that also gave me a bit of courage. And I remember someone saying to me at some point, a pharmacist, whether this was true or not is something else, but this was his opinion. He said the only reason you have this courage to take regulators to court is because you don't own a pharmacy business yet. Because if you did own a pharmacy business and you tried to if you antagonize them by taking them to court, they would try to intimidate you by finding a reason to shut down your business on a regulatory basis.
Yeah.
So I was that one guy with nothing to lose in his eyes. So I could do things like that he considered to be brave. But looking back, it wasn't a very intimidating thing at some point. Also, maybe because I was mostly preoccupied with the PhD. So I wasn't actually required to attend court sessions or give testimony. So I wasn't very involved, at least in person, with the whole court procedures and attending court or anything. So it wasn't very hectic. It wasn't as hectic as people think it was. That I would say that. But I guess it depends.
I mean, it's amazing that it's happened, right? Because like, okay, you can maybe start a business out of this, but like it's opened it up for everyone because it doesn't just apply to you. I imagine that I imagine that now that it's been considered not illegal. Anyone who wants to implement it can. But I imagine most pharmacists can't because of the conflict. I can do it because I don't own a pharmacy. So there's no current conflict there. But most pharmacists own a pharmacy, or at least most retail pharmacists own or work at a pharmacy. So they might not be, appear as impartial as someone who doesn't own a pharmacy business. That's one. And like I said, it's very tricky. It's very difficult in my experience to lock down a business model for a business like this. So I imagine that is also a deterrent for many people. So who knows? No, you've done a good thing. Even like I believe you're probably one of the best people to make this work. But even if it doesn't work, you've like opened up like an opportunity.
I actually said this to somebody also, I think around 2020, and they were saying to me, well, are you coming back to Zim to sort of now implement the MIS now that it's been cleared for implementation? And I said, well, I could, but I would be happier if someone else tries it who is more competent at running a business than I am. I always got the patience because my job is done. As far as I was concerned, my job was done. My job was to just demonstrate that there's nothing illegal about this, and people are better implementers. So I consider myself more like an advocacy or policy advocacy person whose job is just to highlight what's possible. And if they're better implementers than I am, I was actually quite happy to see that happen. But no one stepped up as far as I could tell. So I'm also trying to do the implementation.
So the reluctant warrior had to step up to the plate again.
I actually think I was secretly rooting for a better implementer to come to the stage, but no one came up. So then until I finished my PhD, and I decided, okay, fine, I suppose I can do this. So let's see how it goes. And it's the problem that I'm trying to solve is also sort of like prevalent in other medical fields like imaging. For example, if you want to get a CT scan done, you have to walk around various imaging centers to find the one that does CT scans that day or whatever. So, or also for labs, if you want to get a particular lab test done, not all labs do all tests. So you have to also find out rather unsystematically which lab near you does the tests that you want done. So there's scope for expansion into other medical services, not just pharmaceuticals. So I would be very keen to see that happen. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. So, I mean, where do you get this kind of like fighting spirit from? Like, do you have like someone who inspired you, or like it's just you, it's just being you? Like, that's, you can't remember a day when you didn't fight.
I don't know. Hey, I think it's a question for my therapist. But I think, okay, as a child, I grew up. I've got albinism, so I was very different from other kids. Like I had lighter skin than others, so I stood out a lot. And so that sort of makes you a target for taunts or bullying, or just unwanted attention, really. So I think I learned to develop sort of like a thick skin very early on, and sort of take things on the chin, and sort of be very determined to stand out for the right reasons, if you may. So I was quite gifted academically, so I started to sort of get attention for that. So it was sort of like a way to distract people from noticing what was obviously different about me, to sort of focusing on my academic aptitude and stuff like that. So maybe that's, I don't know. I think I need to unpack that, actually, now that you've asked that.
Yeah.
I need to really contemplate about that. But yeah, I think a big part of who I am now is because of my childhood experiences. The need to sort of
where did you grow up?
Oh, multiple places. My mom used to move around a lot with her job. So I grew up in 3 places mostly. So Bindura, which is like north of Harare, small mining town north of Harare. Mashingo, actually I was born in Mashingo, so I also grew up there, and then Harare. I went to boarding school in Norton and also in Chishawasha. So I was pretty much all over the place. But yeah, so those are the main towns and cities that I grew up in. So always moving around. So it was always sort of adapting to new environments. So I had to learn that skill. Yeah. So I think, yeah. So I think that learning endurance from a very young age, I had to learn endurance from a very, very young age, earlier than most children. And because I couldn't play in the sun as much as other children can, because I still burn easily in the sun. There were times I used to play alone because everyone else was playing in the sun. So I learned to be very independent at a very, very young age. And I learned to solve my own problems at a very young age. So my mom always says that I'm one of her most independent children. So I think that is where it came from, my childhood experiences.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, like kids are mean anyway, but like you stick out.
Yeah, I know. There's no filters. Kids are generally mean. So yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah, it's gotten better as I got older, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah. Nice. That's hectic. And then, like, I guess this is kind of maybe related to this, is like, do you consider yourself as a creative? Like,
yes, I think so. Yeah, because even in primary school, I used to do a lot of public speaking. I would write my own speeches. So whether when there was a function, whether it was World Water Day, World Child Labor Day, or whatever international commemoration, World Breastfeeding Day, and like, our school always used to send public speakers to the events, where all these officials would gather, and there was a whole provincial event. I always used to make the cut. So I could be relied upon. My teachers always used to rely on me to produce a written speech at short notice.
Yeah.
And then present it. I remember someone asking me about my public speaking skills, and they were asking whether I was born with them, and I am not convinced anyone is born with them, because I remember my very first few years of public speaking. I was in grade 6. I used to do it afraid.
Yeah.
So I used to have stage fright, but I would do it anyway. until I stopped. I actually can't pinpoint the day that I can say this is when my stage fright died. I just woke up one day and I didn't have it. So, but I remember that the first few attempts I had stage fright, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something I always tell people that if you're afraid of something, do it afraid. And eventually you just wake up one day and realize you're not afraid anymore. Experience sort of does that.
Yeah.
So now, now I'm perfectly comfortable delivering speeches in front of people. No worries at all. So yeah, so I used to write a lot of speeches, and I used to make our own Christmas decorations because my mom never used to afford all these luxuries. She was a single parent on a government salary, and we were such lovers of things, my sister and I. So most of the things that we wanted, my mom would always say she couldn't afford to buy them, so we made them. My sister now is an engineer, and I'm not surprised by that. She demonstrated engineering skills even when we were children. So looking back, we even tried to build our own swimming pool at some point. So yeah, right in our backyard. So yeah, so we had such huge appetites for things that we couldn't afford, so we made them ourselves. Even I remember one day we got a really good hiding from my mom. Back then it wasn't illegal to beat up children. So the reason was we wanted there were this flip-flops. Was it flip-flops that were in fashion, and we wanted them, but of course mom couldn't afford those. So what we did is we used kitchen knives to cut up the shoes that we already had, sort of convert them into the flip-flops that we wanted. Oh, we got a thorough hiding. But yeah, so yes, again, I can trace it back to our childhoods. When we wanted things, we simply made them. And when I wanted, there was that speech writing and public speaking thing that sort of honed my writing skills. I still write to this day. And our mom was a storyteller as well, because when we first moved to Bindura, our staff, we moved from Mashingo to Bindura, and there was a delay in our staff coming, and we didn't have a TV for a while. So to keep us entertained, she would tell us stories, folk tales. So my sister and I, again, we are storytellers. We have very different styles of telling stories, but we are both storytellers. Yeah. So we're creative in very different senses. So I write, and I create things like the MIS. Yeah. So I would definitely say I'm a creative, and my sister as well. She is.
What if you can have you got a definition for creativity?
Wow, okay. I didn't see that coming, but I would say maybe creativity is a trait, it's an attribute that allows a person to conceive something that is not there and do the work to ensure that it appears, whether it's a story, or an ornament, or a technology, or a service, or a solution, or whatever. But the idea to just conceive that in your head, something that didn't exist before, conceive it in your head and do the work to ensure that or advise those who are doing the work to ensure that it materializes. That is what I would consider creativity. It manifests in all sorts of ways, obviously. Not just the arts, or not just in technology.
Yeah. And do you think, like, I guess people kind of lose that? I feel like kids are like way more creative, and then they kind of lose it as they get older. Like, what do you think it is that, like, why do people lose that?
I think, like any attribute, if it's not fed, or if it's not practiced in sort of like a routine way or frequently, you tend to lose it, because the brain is involved a lot in doing this. And I read somewhere that so for something to happen, at least in the brain, there are neurological pathways that that are activated for you to be able to do something, and they get more efficient with use, and they become dormant with non-use. So I would say that the lazy answer here is if we're starting from the point of conceding that children are creative, but they lose that ability as they grow older, it's just because they are not continuously activating those pathways that allow creativity to keep on manifesting. Yeah. And maybe because it might be because the things that they require, or that they think they require, are already available to them. So there's no impetus for them to create the things that they want. If you recall, I already said that most of the things that we wanted, my sister and I, my mom couldn't afford to buy, so we had to create them ourselves. So maybe the idea that we shouldn't provide children with everything that they request for has some merit. And this should not be construed as me advocating for child abuse, but maybe let's not supply everything, and see if that sort of engenders some creativity as a result.
Yeah, and just having like challenges, right? Like you can still, without abusing your kids, you can still provide challenges.
See what they come up with. Next time they ask for something, and you just try saying, well, go make one and see what comes up.
No, it's really interesting. Like getting back to just like your confidence with public speaking and stuff. I remember the first time I met you, and it was like at the Bites. We had the Bites scholars.
The total event. I remember.
Like get together, and I kind of feel like you were like the center of the room, and everyone just like was kind of rotating around.
You know what? Yesterday, we had an event at work, and someone sat next to. Okay, so my work bestie, like, is my closest friend at work. We sat together in the back row, and someone came to sit next to us, who was a guest at this event, and we both didn't know him. But by the time the event ended, we were such good friends with this guest, such that my bestie then sends a message to say, "Did you know that guy before today?" And then I was like, "No, I did not know he existed before today." And it's like, "No, you got to teach me this thing that you do." I'm like, "What is this thing that I do?" It's like, "You've got such a way with people." And then there's another instance that I think I can quote. So we were at a professional conference, a pharmacist conference that we have every year. And that year we hosted the Deputy Minister of Health. And then I was sitting next to him and I was talking to him. And then one of my friends was sitting across the room and looking at us. And after the dinner, she came to me and said, "Oh, I saw you talking to the Deputy Minister." And I said to myself, "Oh my God, he is being Dudzai and he does not know it." So so it's so I don't know how to explain it. But I think that if I were to advise people, because here's the thing, most people who are good at things, and they might actually not know why they're good at those things, and so it limits the kind of advice that they can give. And I think I'm in that predicament. But I would say that you need to believe that you're interesting, because everyone is. So I know there's this whole school of thought that we're not as interesting as we think we are. But I'd like to challenge that. We're actually far more interesting than we think. Everyone, all 7 billion of us, are far more interesting than we think. So you start from that point of admitting that you are actually far more interesting than you think. It sort of, I think, gives you a boldness to approach the next person and show them that you're actually quite interesting, and find out why they are interesting in return, because everyone is.
Nice.
So that comes in handy during networking events. So it helps if you know a bit of something about the person. So you can find a point of similarity between yourself and the person. For example, if you are trying out for a football team or the national football team, and during introductions at an event, you find out that there's this guy in the room who's been a professional football player. So you could just walk up and say, you know what, I heard you're you used to be a pro. I'm actually trying out for the national team next week. Do you have any tips for me? People love the opportunity to talk about themselves, and so that is an opener. So it helps if you know what the other person does or is about, which is usually the case with celebrities or people of more power than us. You tend to know more about them. So it's easy actually to network with powerful people because their lives are in the public domain. You know what they're about.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, if you don't know much about the person, again, you can still walk up to them, introduce yourself, and sort of ask them what they're about. For example, at the Byte Trust cocktail, it was pretty obvious that everyone there was a Byte scholar, so that was a starting point. So what are you going to study? So it's actually quite easy to network and be a people person. You just have to believe that you are far more interesting than you think, and the other person is also far more interesting than they look. So
yeah, definitely both of those things. I can see that, right? You need those two things because it's like the one, like it's like the self-confidence. You need that self-confidence that, like, if they ask me something, I have something to say. I'm not just going to be embarrassed. And then also, like, you need to be curious about who they are, and like, I can learn something from this person, or like hear their story. That's really cool. Do you have like go-to questions that in your mind, like when you're at an event, you have like, I don't know, questions that you often ask people, or it's just depending on the person, you kind of make it up as you go?
I make it up as I go, but I suppose if you're starting out, there's no harm in having your go-to questions about what they do. And I find people have interesting responses to the question, what do you do? So I know somebody I met at a pub in Durham, and I asked him what he does, and he looked at me straight in the face and says, as little as possible. So you see, you already see that this person has a sense of humor, and laugh about it, and then so that is a good question to start with, I imagine. What do you do? It usually just opens up a door to all sorts of possibilities.
Definitely, it's better than saying like, where do you work, or what work do you do? Not everyone has a job, right?
No, not everyone works. Not everyone views what they do as work. But what do you bring up a lot of possibilities. So someone could say, well, it depends on the time of day. And then if they say that, you say, okay, so what do you do in the morning? So, and then I can almost guarantee that within 2 minutes, you would find a point of common ground. Whether it's something they have for breakfast, or whether it's something they work, or someone they know. I think it's very challenging to speak to someone for 3 minutes and not find any point of commonality. It would be very rare. But so there's limitless opportunities to strike up conversation with the person. I'll keep going back to yesterday's example. So when this stranger sat next to us, and he introduced himself, and obviously he apparently was a very important guest, and because he was mentioned in the opening remarks, and then I Googled him. While sitting next to him, I Googled him and just saw a bit of what he does and what he's about. And so while the presentations were going on, because it was a sitting event with presentations happening on stage. So while things were going on stage, there was opportunity to comment on them. So if something happened on stage, I would turn to him and say something, and then he would laugh, and then he would do the same. I think after he realized that I'm very sociable, he would do the same. If something happened on stage, he would ask me a question or say something, would laugh. So by the time the real networking started, when there was an intermission and there was music playing and people were having drinks, we had plenty to talk about. Yeah, you should just be. I think I don't know how to encourage people to be more open. It's not as hideous as you think. It's just like meeting someone on the bus. You see something you both find interesting, you start talking about it. So there are many ways. That's the short answer.
Yeah, it's also it's like that your public speaking thing, right? It's like
you have to
start doing it. You have to start doing it and like put yourself out there. And at some stage it'll just be natural. Like at first it might be like awkward and like, you just be a bit like struggle with it a bit, but over time I'm sure it just kind of becomes a thing. That's really
and there's some movies, obviously it's not always going to be a success. For example, I remember this one time I was in a bank, the banking hall, and I was sitting somewhere and someone looked like they were in dire need of a seat or something. And I offered them up my seat. They just looked at me like I was speaking Greek and they were not fluent in Greek. So sometimes your efforts will fall flat on their faces. Some people are just not out to their friends. So, but mostly it pays off. Mostly people have a friendly disposition. Average person has a friendly disposition, I imagine. I found.
You just have to sometimes be the person to make the first move.
Yeah. And again, do it afraid. And one day you won't be.
I love it. Well, Dudzai, I think that's a nice way for us to end our conversation.
All right. Oh, great. I don't know how long it took though. I wasn't watching the clock. How long did it take?
Was there anything else you wanted to like share? Or,
no, I was actually enjoying this. Yeah. How often do you do this podcast?
Not often enough, but if you're up for coming on again at some point, I don't know, like a year down the line or something, it would be really cool. It's just like a catch up.
I would like that. I actually quite enjoyed it.
No, it's been really great, and like, thank you so much for sharing some of your stories.
All right. Thanks.
Sure
when you put it out, you can send me a link so I can share it with my people.
For sure. And where can people kind of follow you or connect with you?
Oh yeah, I'm not very big on social media actually. I'm on Twitter, but I don't post much. I'm on Facebook, again, where I don't post much.
I feel like you used to use social media a lot more. You're like more.
I know. There's a lot of things that I need to be doing that I'm not doing. But LinkedIn, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. But Facebook and Twitter, not so much. I do go on Facebook a lot. I actually go on Facebook several times a day to sort of look at other people's posts and leave reaction emojis. Once in a while I leave a whole comment, but but I rarely post myself. I think my last post was in June-ish.
Probably a healthy thing, actually.
Good. There was a time I was off Facebook for 2 years. That's 2 to 3 years entirely. I deactivated my account for 2 to 3 years, but it was only because I wanted to focus on writing up my PhD thesis. So I left social media entirely. But yeah, I am on all platforms. I just don't post very frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I can see what's happening. Even on Twitter, I'm on Twitter several times a day. That's why I get my news updates and you know. But
So
I
if people
don't
want to
post.
stay updated with your startup, LinkedIn would probably.
We have a Facebook page actually on Facebook.
Okay.
The Facebook page for the startup is actually more active than my personal Facebook page. So
Yeah, that's good.
so the medical information service Zimbabwe is on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. So if people just search for MIS Zimbabwe.
They search for the full name, the Medical Information Service
Okay. Perfect.
Zimbabwe. Yeah.
That's
Then they get. Yeah.
fantastic. Well, Dudzai, thanks so much. This has been great, and we'll chat again soon.
All right, Kim. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. This is my second podcast. Yeah, I'm on another one. I think in 2 to 3 weeks. Yeah, so
You're getting into
I'm getting the hang of it.
yeah. No, it's fun.
All right.
Cool. Well,
All right.
chat soon.
Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye.